The avoidant person is haunted by something they never expected, something their entire defensive system was unprepared for: your emotionless exit. They're used to dramatic endings, to tears and pleas, to anger and accusations, to people fighting for the relationship or expressing devastation at its ending. They're prepared for these responses because they've seen them before, because their patterns consistently trigger these reactions, because their defensive structure has built-in responses to emotional exits that allow them to maintain their narrative and their sense of control. But you gave them none of that. You left cleanly, calmly, without the emotional display they expected and were prepared to handle. You didn't beg them to stay. You didn't cry or express how much they hurt you. You didn't fight for the relationship or try to convince them to give it another chance. You didn't get angry or tell them everything they did wrong. You simply acknowledged the ending, accepted it with apparent equanimity, and walked away with your dignity intact and your emotions completely controlled or invisible to them. This emotionless exit has created profound psychological disturbance in the avoidant person that they cannot process or resolve using their normal mechanisms. Your calm departure violated every expectation they had, disrupted the familiar patterns they rely on, and forced them into uncomfortable territory where their usual defensive responses don't work. They keep replaying your exit in their minds, analyzing every word and gesture, searching for the emotional reaction they expected but never got, trying to understand how you could leave so calmly when they've seen others fall apart in similar circumstances. Your emotionless exit haunts them because it suggests several possibilities they find deeply disturbing: that you never cared as much as they thought you did, that you're stronger and more detached than they believed, that they misjudged the entire relationship and your investment in it, or that you saw through them so completely that you weren't even worth getting emotional about their loss. None of these interpretations feel good to them, and they cannot settle on one, because your lack of emotional display left them with no data to work with, no reactions to analyze, no emotional outbursts to dismiss or use to justify their behavior. Your exit was a ghost that left no trace they can analyze and no closure they can achieve. Why your calm departure broke their entire mental script. The avoidant person has a mental script developed through years of relationship patterns about how endings go and what role each person plays in those endings. This script has been reinforced through multiple experiences where they withdrew or ended relationships and the other person responded in predictable ways that confirmed the avoidance worldview and justified their patterns. Your emotionless exit completely broke this script, leaving the avoidant person without the familiar narrative structure they rely on to make sense of relationship endings and to protect their ego from uncomfortable truths about their own patterns. The script the avoidant person expects goes something like this. They create distance or end the relationship. The other person becomes emotional and pursues them. The avoidant maintains their calm, rational position while the other person is too emotional or too needy. The emotional contrast confirms to the avoidant that they made the right decision because the other person clearly can't handle things maturely, and eventually the ending occurs with the avoidant feeling vindicated in their choice and superior in their emotional control compared to the other person's emotional display. This script serves multiple defensive functions. It makes the avoidant feel like the mature, rational one. It provides evidence that the other person was indeed too needy or emotionally unstable. It gives them something to focus on other than their own patterns, and it allows them to exit feeling good about their decision rather than guilty or uncertain. Your emotionless exit disrupted every element of this script. When you left calmly, you didn't give them the emotional reaction they expected and were prepared to handle. You didn't pursue them or beg them to reconsider. You didn't cry or express devastation. You didn't get angry or accuse them of their patterns. You simply accepted the ending with apparent calm, wished them well, perhaps, and left with your emotions either genuinely regulated or at least completely hidden from them. This response was not in their script, and they don't have prepared defensive responses for it because it's so outside their normal experience. The absence of your expected emotional reaction means the avoidant person cannot use your emotions as distraction from examining their own role in the ending. Typically, when the other person becomes very emotional, the avoidant can focus on those emotions, judge them as excessive, frame them as evidence of the other person's instability or neediness, and thereby avoid looking at their own behavior that caused those emotions. But you gave them no emotional display to judge or dismiss. There was nothing excessive in your response that they could point to as justification for their decision. You were calm, measured, apparently fine with the ending. This left them with nothing to focus on except the ending itself and their role in it, which is exactly what their defensive system is designed to avoid. Your calm departure also denied them the satisfaction or validation that comes from being pursued. Part of the avoidant person's pattern, though they would never admit it, includes deriving validation from the other person's obvious pain or pursuit after they create distance. The fact that you care enough to chase them, to be devastated by their withdrawal, to fight for the relationship, confirms to them that they matter, that they're important, that they have power. This validation is twisted and dysfunctional, but it's part of how they manage their deep insecurity about their own worth. When you left emotionlessly, you denied them this validation. Your calm acceptance suggested that maybe losing them wasn't the devastating event they assumed it would be for you, that maybe they weren't as important or irreplaceable as they needed to believe. The emotionless exit broke their script by reversing the typical power dynamic. Usually, the avoidant person is the one who is calm and controlled, while the other person is emotional and reactive, which creates power dynamic where the avoidant feels superior and in control. But your emotionless exit put you in the position of being calm and controlled while leaving them confused and unable to process what happened. They're the ones who are now reactive, who are replaying the exit obsessively, who are disturbed and unable to achieve closure. You took the position of power and control that they usually occupy, and they're in the uncomfortable position of being the one who is emotionally affected and unable to settle themselves, even though their affect is confusion and disturbance, rather than overt sadness or anger. Your calm departure also broke their script about who you were and what you meant to them. Throughout the relationship, they might have perceived you as more invested than they were, more emotional, more attached, more likely to fall apart if things ended. These perceptions confirmed their narrative about themselves as more independent, less needy, more capable of handling endings. But your emotionless exit contradicted all of these perceptions. You proved more capable of handling the ending than they expected. You demonstrated more emotional control than they assumed you had. You showed more strength and less attachment than their narrative about you allowed for. This contradiction forces them to reconsider who you were and what the relationship meant, questioning assumptions they had taken for granted. The break in their script has left the avoidant person without their normal coping mechanisms and defensive responses. They don't know how to process an ending where the other person was calm and accepting. They don't have a narrative that makes sense of this response. They cannot fit your behavior into their existing framework about relationships and about their own patterns. This creates ongoing psychological tension and confusion that they cannot resolve, which is why your exit haunts them. It's an unprocessed experience that their mental systems cannot categorize or file away neatly because it violated all their expectations about how these situations unfold. The psychological confusion when you didn't beg or fight. The avoidant person's psychological confusion about your emotionless exit centers, particularly on your failure to beg them to stay or to fight for the relationship. These behaviors, begging and fighting for connection, are so common in the avoidance experience of endings that their absence creates profound confusion that the avoidant person cannot adequately explain or understand. This confusion manifests in specific ways that reveal both their expectations and the discomfort your unexpected behavior created. The avoidant person expected you to beg because begging is what most people do when faced with losing someone they care about, particularly when that loss seems avoidable or when they believe they can convince the other person to change their mind. The avoidant has seen this pattern repeatedly. They create distance or suggest ending. The other person begs them to reconsider, promises to change, or to need less, or to give more space, expresses how much the relationship means to them, pleads for another chance. This begging serves several functions for the avoidant. It confirms they have power and control. It validates their importance to the other person. It gives them something to reject that makes them feel strong and decisive. And it provides contrast between the emotional beggar and their own calm rationality. When you didn't beg, when you simply accepted the ending and left, the avoidant person was left confused about why you didn't fight for what you supposedly wanted. If you cared about them and the relationship, shouldn't you have tried harder to keep it? Shouldn't you have expressed how much losing them hurts? Shouldn't you have pleaded for another chance? Or tried to convince them that the relationship was worth saving? The absence of these behaviors doesn't fit with their understanding of how people behave when they care about someone. This creates cognitive dissonance, where either they have to accept that you didn't care as much as they thought, which damages their ego and their sense of their own importance, or they have to accept that you cared but had such strong boundaries and self-respect that you wouldn't beg, which also challenges their narrative about you being the more needy or dependent one. The avoidant person also expected you to fight for the relationship, to make arguments about why it should continue, to challenge their reasons for ending or creating distance, to refuse to accept their decision easily. Fighting for the relationship is another common response that avoidants have learned to expect and even to rely on. When the other person fights, the avoidant can dig in their heels, can reinforce their decision, can feel strong in their boundaries. The fight creates dynamic where they're defending their choice against someone who is pushing them, which makes them feel more certain about their decision and more justified in it. The other person's fighting also extends the ending process, keeping them engaged and giving them more opportunities to feel important and wanted even as they're pushing away. Your refusal to fight, your acceptance of the ending without argument, your calm recognition that if they wanted to leave or create distance, then that was their choice, and you weren't going to beg or argue, completely disrupted this expected dynamic. There was nothing for them to push against, no arguments for them to counter, no pleading for them to reject. You simply agreed that if this was what they wanted, then it was over, and you left. This agreement and acceptance was so unexpected that it created confusion about what it meant. Did it mean you didn't care enough to fight? Did it mean you had been wanting out too, and their exit just gave you excuse? Did it mean you saw them so clearly that you knew fighting was pointless? None of these interpretations feel good to the avoidant person, and they cannot settle on one. The absence of begging and fighting also meant the ending happened much faster and more cleanly than the avoidant person might have unconsciously wanted. Many avoidants, despite creating the ending, actually want the ending to be prolonged, to have some back and forth, to have the other person pursue them before finally accepting things are over. This prolonged ending allows them to feel wanted and important while still maintaining their ultimate control over the outcome. It gives them opportunity to feel guilty and to process what they're doing, to potentially reconsider, to experience the other person's pain in ways that confirm they mattered. But your emotionless exit cut this process short. One conversation, clean ending, you're gone. The speed and cleanliness of it left them without the prolonged processing time they didn't know they needed. Your calm acceptance without begging or fighting also meant the avoidant person didn't get to feel like the strong one who held firm against emotional pressure. Part of their self-image involves being the one who can make difficult decisions, who doesn't let emotions control them, who can end things even when the other person is falling apart. But if you didn't fall apart, if you didn't apply emotional pressure, if you were equally calm and decisive in accepting the ending, then they don't get to feel special or strong in their ability to withstand your emotions. You matched their emotional control, or even exceeded it, which suggests you might have been the stronger one all along, a possibility that deeply disturbs their sense of themselves. The psychological confusion is also rooted in the avoidant person's inability to determine whether your emotionless exit was genuine emotional control and strength, or whether it was performance hiding devastation underneath. They want to believe you were devastated, but hiding it, because that would confirm their importance and would fit their expectations. But they also fear you genuinely weren't that affected, because that would mean they didn't matter as much as they needed to believe. They cannot resolve this question because you gave them no data. You were simply calm, controlled, and gone. This ambiguity is torturous for someone who needs control and certainty. They replay your exit looking for cracks in your composure, moments where your real emotions leaked through, evidence that you were affected. If they find nothing, the confusion intensifies. The absence of begging and fighting also means the avoidant person cannot use your behavior to justify their decision or to make themselves feel better about their role in the ending. If you had begged or fought, they could tell themselves they made the right choice because look how needy you were, how unable to respect their boundaries, how emotional and unstable. But you gave them nothing to use for this justification. You were respectful, calm, boundaried, mature. This means they have to sit with their decision without the comfort of being able to point to your behavior as justification for it. The decision stands on its own, based solely on their patterns and their choice, and this is uncomfortable territory for someone whose defensive system relies on externalizing responsibility. How your emotionless exit made them question everything. Your emotionless exit didn't just confuse the avoidant person about the ending itself. It triggered a cascade of questions and doubts that extend backward through the entire relationship and forward into their understanding of themselves and their patterns. This questioning is deeply unsettling because it threatens the narratives the avoidant person has constructed to protect their ego and to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about their limitations and their impact on others. The first question your emotionless exit raises for them is whether you ever cared as deeply as they thought you did. Throughout the relationship, your investment and emotional expression might have confirmed to them that you were attached, that you cared significantly, that the relationship mattered deeply to you. But your ability to leave so calmly challenges this understanding. If you cared that much, why weren't you more devastated? Why didn't you fight harder? Why could you walk away so cleanly? The avoidant person is forced to consider that maybe you weren't as invested as they believed, that maybe your feelings weren't as deep as they assumed, that maybe they mattered less to you than they thought. This possibility is painful because it reduces their sense of their own importance and questions their ability to read people and situations accurately. But the alternative interpretation is equally disturbing, that you did care deeply, but you had such strong boundaries and self-respect that you could leave someone you loved because they couldn't meet your needs. This interpretation suggests emotional maturity and strength that challenges the avoidant person's sense of superiority. It means you valued yourself more than you valued keeping them, that your standards for how you deserve to be treated exceeded what they were providing, that you had the strength to walk away from someone you cared about because caring wasn't enough. Reason to accept poor treatment. This interpretation makes the avoidant person look at themselves less favorably and look at you more respectfully than they did during the relationship. Your emotionless exit also makes them question whether they ever really knew you at all. They had constructed an image of who you were, what you needed, how you would react in various situations. Your exit contradicted much of this image, revealing that perhaps they didn't understand you as well as they thought. This recognition is unsettling because it means their judgments throughout the relationship might have been based on inaccurate perceptions, that they were relating to their projection of you rather than to your actual self, that they missed important truths about who you were and what you were capable of. This forces them to reconsider the entire relationship through the lens of recognizing they didn't fully understand the person they were with. The emotionless exit raises questions about what you actually thought of them. If you could leave so calmly, had you already processed that the relationship wasn't working? Had you already emotionally divested before the ending? Had you been planning to leave and their ending just happened to come first? Had you been seeing their patterns clearly all along and were simply waiting for the right moment or the final straw? The thought that you might have been emotionally ahead of them, that you might have been ready to leave before they initiated the ending, is disturbing because it reverses their assumption that they were the less invested party who had all the power and control. Your exit also makes the avoidant person question whether their patterns are more visible and damaging than they realized. They might have believed their defensive strategies were subtle, that their patterns weren't obvious, that they successfully maintained image of being reasonable and mature even while withdrawing or creating distance. But your emotionless exit suggests you might have seen through all of that you might have understood exactly what they were doing and why, and that you decided it wasn't worth trying to change or work with. This possibility means their defenses are more transparent than they believed, and that their patterns are recognizable to others as dysfunction rather than as legitimate preferences or needs. The emotionless exit raises questions about what happens next in ways the avoidant person cannot control or predict. With emotional exits, they know what to expect. Initial, intense emotion that gradually subsides. Some period of the other person hoping for reconciliation, eventual moving on. But your emotionless exit provides no roadmap. Will you ever reach out? Would you even care if they reached out? Have you already moved on emotionally? Are you dating others immediately? Do you think about them? Or have you simply closed that chapter completely? The uncertainty about your trajectory and your ongoing emotional state creates anxiety because the avoidant person cannot predict or control what you're doing or feeling or whether you're available if they ever wanted to reconnect. Your exit also makes them question whether their approach to relationships is fundamentally wrong or dysfunctional in ways they haven't wanted to acknowledge. Your calm departure suggests you saw something clearly enough to walk away without doubt or emotional entanglement. What did you see? Was it their patterns? Was it their limitations? Was it the inevitability of the relationship failing because of their inability to sustain intimacy? The fact that you could see clearly enough to leave cleanly implies judgment of them and their patterns that they cannot escape or refute. You voted with your feet and your calm acceptance that they weren't capable of meeting your needs. This vote is harder to dismiss than emotional accusations would have been because it was conveyed through action and composure rather than through words they could argue with. The avoidant person also questions whether they made a mistake in letting you go or in creating the conditions that led to the ending. With emotional exits, they can console themselves that the person was too needy anyway, too emotional, too demanding. But your emotionless exit provides no such consolation. You proved you weren't too emotional or too needy. You demonstrated strength and boundaries and self-respect. This makes them wonder if you are actually exactly what they claim to want. Someone independent and emotionally controlled who didn't need constant reassurance. If you were what they wanted and they still couldn't maintain the relationship, the problem was definitively them and their patterns, not you and your needs. This recognition is uncomfortable and leads to questions about whether they're capable of maintaining relationship with anyone, even with someone who met all their stated preferences. Why they keep replaying your departure looking for cracks. The avoidant person cannot let go of your emotionless exit. They replay it obsessively in their mind, analyzing every detail, searching for something they missed, looking for cracks in your composure that would reveal the emotional reaction they expected but didn't see. This compulsive replaying and analysis serves several psychological functions and reveals the depth of disturbance your calm departure created. The primary reason they keep replaying your departure is that they need to find evidence that you were actually devastated but hiding it, that beneath your calm exterior you were falling apart, that you cared more than you showed. This need stems from their ego and their need to feel important and impactful. If you genuinely weren't that affected by losing them, it means they didn't matter as much as they needed to believe, that they're more replaceable than they thought, that their importance to you was less than their ego requires. So they searched the replay for signs they missed. Did your voice waver even slightly? Did your eyes look sad even though you weren't crying? Did you pause in ways that suggested you were controlling emotion? Did your hands shake, or did you avoid looking at them? Any tiny crack in your composure would confirm that you were actually devastated, but controlling it, which would allow them to restore their narrative that they mattered deeply to you. They also replay your departure, looking for something you said that would explain your calm reaction, some comment that would make sense of behavior they found baffling. Did you say something about having already processed the relationship's end? Did you indicate you were relieved it was over? Did you suggest you'd been thinking about leaving yourself? They search for verbal clues that would solve the mystery of your emotional control, and that would tell them how to interpret your behavior. The absence of such clues in their memory makes them wonder if they missed something, if they were so shocked by your calm that they didn't fully process everything you said. The compulsive replaying also involves them imagining alternative scenarios where you showed the emotion they expected. They imagine you breaking down and crying. Imagine you begging them to reconsider. Imagine you expressing anger or hurt. These imagined scenarios feel more real and more satisfying to them than what actually happened because they fit their expectations and their need to see themselves as important. By imagining the emotional exit they expected, they try to retroactively give themselves the validation and the script they were denied by your actual calm departure. But these fantasies don't satisfy because they keep confronting the reality that none of that happened, that you were actually calm and controlled. The avoidant person replays your exit, looking for signs that your calm was performance, that you were acting strong, but were actually struggling. They want to believe that after you left, you fell apart, that you cried in your car or went home and collapsed, that the composure was just for them, and that your real emotions emerged once you were alone. This belief would allow them to maintain their narrative about their importance while explaining your unexpected behavior as pride or performance rather than as genuine emotional control. But they have no way to confirm this belief, no access to what you did or felt after you left, and this uncertainty tortures them. They search their replay for any hint that your calm was unsustainable, that it was mask that would drop once you were out of their sight. They keep replaying the departure looking for something they said or did that would justify trying to reach out. Some opening you left that would make contact appropriate or welcome. Did you say anything that suggested you wanted them to reach out later? Did you leave any ambiguity about whether this was truly final? Did you express any hope for future friendship or future contact? They searched for any statement or behavior that would give them permission to break the silence, because the clean finality of your exit left them with no clear path to reconnection if they ever wanted it. The absence of any such opening is part of what haunts them. You truly close the door without leaving it even slightly cracked. The replaying also serves to keep you present in their mind when you're physically absent. By constantly thinking about your exit, analyzing it, trying to understand it, they maintain connection to you and to the relationship, even though both are over. This maintenance of mental connection might be the avoidant person's way of managing their own attachment and loss, keeping you alive in their thoughts because they cannot keep you alive in their life. The emotionless exit gave them something mysterious to obsess over, something unresolved to chew on mentally, and this obsession keeps them tethered to you in ways that a more emotional, resolved exit might not have. The avoidant person also replays your departure because it represents failure of their entire defensive system. They're used to being able to control situations, to predict reactions, to maintain their narrative and their sense of superiority. Your emotionless exit represented total failure of all these controls. They couldn't predict your reaction, couldn't control it once it was happening, couldn't fit it into their narrative, and couldn't maintain sense of superiority because you matched or exceeded their own emotional control. This failure disturbs them at deep level because it suggests their entire approach to relationships and their understanding of people might be flawed. They replay the departure, trying to find where their assessment went wrong, trying to understand how they so completely misread you or the situation. The compulsive replaying creates its own problems because it prevents the avoidant person from moving forward. They're stuck in the moment of your departure, unable to process it and file it away, unable to achieve closure or to fully move on. This stuck state is ironic because the avoidant person is usually the one who moves on quickly and easily, who doesn't dwell on ended relationships, who can emotionally divest and continue forward without looking back. But your emotionless exit broke their ability to do this. They cannot emotionally divest because they never got the emotional data they needed to process the ending. They cannot move forward because the ending feels incomplete and unresolved. They cannot stop looking back because looking back is their attempt to find what they missed. The haunting quality of your emotionless exit is that it gave them no closure, no resolution, no satisfying conclusion to the story. Emotional exits provide closure because there's emotional expression, there's drama and intensity, there's a clear ending point where things fell apart. But your calm departure provided none of that. One moment you were together, the next you calmly agreed things were over and left. There was no dramatic finale, no emotional catharsis, no clear point where the relationship definitively died. It just quietly ended, and this quiet ending leaves the avoidant person without the psychological markers they need to fully process loss and move on. Your emotionless exit haunts them, not just because it was unexpected, but because it was incomplete in ways they cannot resolve, creating perpetual unfinished business in their mind that they keep trying to complete by replaying the departure and searching for the emotional reaction that would have given them the closure they need, but that you strategically or genuinely never provided.